Welcome back, Focus Learners. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. In this explainer, we're going to do a real critical breakdown of how we actually evaluate medical education. I mean, if you've ever taught a class, run a workshop, or mentored a junior colleague, you probably asked yourself, did that actually make any difference? Well, today, we're looking at the absolute gold standard framework that answers exactly that question. Let's jump right in.
I want to start by asking you a really direct question. Think about the very last time you taught a session. After you wrapped up, did you just hand out a standard feedback form, skim the results, feel pretty good about yourself, and just move on? Honestly, we all do it. It's kind of the plain, uncomfortable truth of medical education. Every teacher collects feedback, but almost nobody knows what to actually do with it. And, to be totally honest, almost nobody is even asking the right questions in the first place.
So here is the absolutely crucial point. That feedback form you handed out, it told you almost nothing about whether your teaching actually worked. Getting a 5-star rating tells you, well, if the students liked you, or if the room was comfortable, or maybe if the coffee was hot. But it tells you literally nothing about whether a single person in that room learned a skill that will translate into a changed behavior on the ward, a behavior that actually helps a real patient.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to tackle the problem with feedback, and then walk through the 4 levels of Donald Kirkpatrick's evaluation framework: reaction, learning, behavior, and results. And finally, we'll look beyond the model itself.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the problem with feedback and why we're measuring it all wrong.
You see, most training evaluation asks the wrong question right out of the gate. Did they enjoy it? Well, that is definitely not the same thing as did they learn it? And honestly, we can take that even further. Did they learn it is not the same as did they actually use it? And did they use it is absolutely not the same as did it actually help the patient? Popularity data, like whether the room was a nice temperature or if people laughed at your jokes, is completely disconnected from actual clinical effectiveness. And this brilliantly illustrates that exact disconnect. Imagine you prescribe a brand new medication to a patient. They come back 2 weeks later and tell you they absolutely loved it. The pill was super easy to swallow, the pharmacist was lovely, and hey, the packaging was beautifully designed. Would you call that treatment a success? I mean, of course not. You really just want to know if their blood pressure actually went down. Teaching is exactly the same thing. A 5-star rating is just nice packaging. We need to be measuring the actual clinical outcome. Now, this is the exact problem Donald Kirkpatrick hit the nail on the head with back in 1959. He saw all these organizations measuring mere satisfaction and calling it evidence of effectiveness. So to fix this, he built a 4-step framework, which his son James updated in 2006. We move from reaction up to learning, then behavior, and finally results. Each level goes a little deeper. Sure, it's a bit harder to measure, but it tells you something infinitely more important than the level right before it.
Let's move on to Section 2, Level 1, Reaction. Basically, did they like it?
Reaction is pretty straightforward. It simply measures how participants felt about the training, the standard feedback form. To use a clinical analogy here, it's like a patient rating their hospital stay a solid 9 out of 10 because they had the loveliest nurses and really great food, but completely ignoring the fact that they were given the wrong medication for 3 straight days. Reaction tells you all about the experience. It tells you exactly 0 about the outcome.
I absolutely love this quote. A standing ovation does not mean the surgery went well. Think about it. You could deliver this highly charismatic, totally engaging lecture on recognizing deteriorating patients. Everyone claps, everybody gives you 5 stars, but what if, 3 weeks later, one of those exact students fails to escalate a patient with a critical warning sign, like a rapidly rising news score? The feedback form didn't predict that because it literally never could.
Now look, Level 1 isn't totally useless. It can definitely tell you if a session needs some redesigning, but the best upgrade you can make right this second is to stop asking, did you enjoy it? And start asking, was it relevant? Measuring perceived relevance, like how directly applicable this material is to their actual day-to-day clinical work, is a much better predictor of whether a learner is actually going to engage with the material after they walk out of the room.
Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 3, Level 2, Learning. Did they actually learn it?
Level 2, Learning, measures whether participants acquired new knowledge, skills, or attitudes as a direct result of the training. And the crucial phrase here is direct result, because to prove this, you need a baseline. Think about a clinical trial. If you don't have a control group or a baseline measurement, you simply cannot claim a drug worked just because a patient got better. I mean, they might have improved on their own anyway.
It's a really simple, undeniable fact. You cannot prove progress without knowing where someone started. If you teach a heavy session on neutropenic sepsis and your students rate their confidence at practically 0 before the session, but a solid 4 out of 5 afterwards, that pre and post shift, that is level 2 evidence. And it is infinitely more meaningful than just handing them a survey at the end asking if they liked your slides.
Now, what's really interesting here is a dangerous trap that most educators fall into. We constantly use self-rated confidence as our level 2 metric. But back in 2021, researchers Allen, Hay, and Palermo found out that self-rated confidence is a highly unreliable measure of real competence, especially for novices. Basically, novice learners just don't know enough to accurately judge what they don't know. They might feel confident because the teacher was really engaging, but confidence is not competence. You absolutely have to include an objective element, like a case scenario or a practical hands-on task, to see what they can actually do.
Which brings us to Section 4, Levels 3 and 4, Behavior and Results. This is the toughest barrier in education.
So, level 3 is behavior. This is measuring whether participants actually changed how they work in the real clinical environment, not just in a practice room. Imagine you teach a junior doctor how to break bad news. In the simulation room, their empathy, their structure, it's completely perfect. But then 3 weeks later, on a super busy ward, they fall right back into their old, rushed, avoidant habits. Well, level 2 learning happened, for sure, but level 3 behavior transfer completely failed.
The Kirkpatricks noted that behavior change just isn't automatic. It requires 3 really vital ingredients: opportunity, support, and commitment. A learner has to have the actual chance to use the skill. They have to personally commit to changing, and crucially, they need support. This is where the so-called hidden curriculum sneaks in. If a student learns to escalate a patient early, but their senior consultant dismisses that early escalation as overcautious, boom, that new behavior is immediately extinguished. The work environment absolutely has to support the learning.
And finally, we reach the top of the mountain. Level 4, results. This is the holy grail of evaluation. It asks the ultimate question: did the teaching actually improve patient care? We aren't talking about a surrogate marker here. This is the hard outcome. Did complication rates actually drop? Did patient satisfaction measurably improve? To show you what real level 4 evidence looks like, we can look at some landmark simulation research by Magagi and his colleagues. They implemented simulation-based training with deliberate practice for junior doctors and tracked the real-world data. And the result? Sepsis mortality directly dropped, and the time to antibiotics significantly reduced compared to traditional training. To put that into perspective, this kind of massive hard outcome data is literally what drove the global expansion of simulation centers in medical schools. It's a real game changer. Now, level 4 is incredibly hard to measure. It requires massive data sets and a whole lot of time. But even if you can't measure it yourself for every single class, keeping it in mind keeps you honest about what teaching is actually for. As the saying goes, the only person who can tell you whether your teaching worked is the patient. We aren't teaching just to get good test scores or a bunch of 5-star ratings. We're teaching to produce clinicians who deliver better patient care. Every single decision we make should trace right back to that. Let's wrap things up with Section 5, Beyond the Model, Improving Training.
In 2013, researchers Haji, Morin, and Parker published this brilliant critique in medical education. They pointed out that most institutions just use the Kirkpatrick model for justifying training. They stop at level 1 or 2, tick the box, and say, hey, look, high scores, the training works. That is essentially the illusion of accountability. True, rigorous evaluation shifts the whole focus to improving training. It doesn't just ask if it worked, it asks how and why it worked, under what specific conditions, and for which specific learners. It treats evaluation as a vital tool for evolution, not just a way to justify your budget.
So what does this all mean for you? What's your main takeaway from this explainer? Look, your goal isn't to suddenly start measuring level 4 patient mortality outcomes for every single Tuesday morning lecture you give. That's just not realistic. The goal is simply to move just one level deeper than you currently are. If you only hand out a feedback form right now, try adding a pre- and post-knowledge check. If you're already doing that, try following up a month later to check for real behavior change on the ward. I want to leave you with this really powerful lingering thought. Teach like it matters, because it absolutely does. So are you evaluating just to check a box? Or are you evaluating to actually improve patient care? Think about that before our next explainer. Thanks so much for learning with me today.